Now to things going on overseas in Iraq. The U.S. held a ceremony in Baghdad today, a ceremony to end military operations there. It's been a long and deadly war for the U.S. troops. About 4,500 U.S. soldiers have lost their lives since it all started back in 2003. NBC's Richard Engel reports now from Iraq's capital.
In a brief ceremony on a base on the edge of Baghdad, the United States took down the flag of its command here to mark the end of the military mission. With the casing of the colors, the American military command in Iraq is officially closed. The Iraq War, as a war led by the U.S. military, is no more. All that's left to do now is withdraw the 4,000 remaining troops in the coming days. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta.
No words, no ceremony can provide full tribute to the sacrifices that have brought this day to pass.
But as the mission ends, most troops have already made it south to Kuwait, where they repack.
Think about my wife again, going back, spend some time with the family.
And go through pre-flight inspections. After years of fighting, they're not used to carrying just tiny bottles of liquids when they travel.
No projectile weapons, such as slingshots or pellet guns. No pornography.
But mostly, the troops wait.
The family, they're tired of me being gone all the time, so it's going to be nice to be home for a little while.
You hear a lot of that, excitement for the simplest of things. Family, friends, maybe a few beers.
Not being in the desert all the time, just being able to spend the weekends at home. I haven't really had a day off since I took leave.
But out processing takes days, sometimes longer. After a war and with family waiting, Kuwait can feel like the worst layover ever. Staff Sergeant Michael Stevens served 4 tours in Iraq in some of the toughest war zones.
We were heading to a day without, praying that, not me today.
He lost a finger in combat. Some of his friends didn't make it.
What pushed me to keep going was knowing that I wasn't going to give up. My friends obviously took the ultimate sacrifice, and I wasn't going to turn around and say, I'm done, because they wouldn't have done it.
Stevens plans to surprise his 4 children by being home for Christmas after missing so many. And now there's just a 16-hour flight to go on a charter plane from Delta. The flight crew try to lift the troops' spirits as America's biggest military mission since Vietnam is ending for the holidays. But many Iraqis worry about their future and fear there could be a return of sectarian violence. Richard Engel, NBC News, Baghdad.
Joining me now is Dr. Shaul Gabbay, a professor at DU and an expert on the Middle East. It's always good to see you. So you heard that in Richard Engel's piece, that there is the fear of a big return of sectarian violence. Do you think that's a possibility?
That is the most important scare that we have in terms of the developments in Iraq today. Excuse me. In addition to the fact that Iraq is very weak, its military cannot defend, cannot secure the country. A very important constituency is Iran, with a very growing, fastly population of Shiite Muslim in Iraq. We had 1 million people who were killed in the war between Iraq and Iran, and today we are very worried about what would be the consequences. However, there are also positive consequences. The Arab Spring is definitely connected to what has happened in Iraq. The weapons of mass destruction that Libya has gave up, it was because of what was happening to Saddam Hussein. So there are positive and negative, and of course, ending a war formally is a good thing.
One of the potential negatives, especially inside Iraq, is the economy. It's still very fragile. I mean, even the basics of electricity and water are not consistent at all. What do you think is next for the country as they try to continue to rebuild that infrastructure?
We don't have a real democracy in the Middle East. This was an experiment. This was a sandbox to see what could happen. However, the process is moving forward, and the economy is very important. Remember, this is a very rich country in terms of its oil reserves. The question is, would Iraq be able to secure these oil refineries, these oil fields? And that's a big question, which of course will have determined effects on the economy altogether. But the fact that Iraq has the potential of succeeding economically is a very important factor, including the relationship with the United States.
You called this an experiment. a failed experiment or a successful one?
In some ways, it failed. Remember, the original motivation was because we thought that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, which he didn't have, that he has relationship with Al-Qaeda that he didn't have. But we have a government today which was elected by its own people, the first in the Arab world, has a ripple effect on what is going to happen in the Middle East also in the future. But remember, even though we have our troops, the uniformed troops being pulled, we still will have several hundreds of CIAs, overt actions in Iraq. It's not the end of our involvement in Iraq.
And it'll remain in the headlines for some years to come. Shaul
Absolutely.
Gabbay, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.